May 16, 2002, Scottsdale, Arizona. 34-year-old Sean Atwood was working from home making trades on the stock market online when a 20-member SWAT team suddenly burst into his apartment. Wielding guns, the police yelled at Atwood to get down on the floor. He was handcuffed and arrested, charged with money laundering and conspiracy. Ironically, Atwood, persuaded by his girlfriend, had already given up his wild life as Arizona's biggest ecstasy kingpin and settled down to domestic bliss. In fact, Atwood thought he had gotten away with it all. Sean Atwood was born to Derek and Barbara Atwood on October 28, 1968. He grew up in Widnes, a small chemical manufacturing town near Liverpool in northwest England. His loving parents encouraged him to excel at school, and he did. As a teen, Atwood became interested in the stock market. With some books and the help of his economics teacher, Atwood began to learn about stocks. Soon, he was reading the Financial Times. By age 16, Atwood had made his first trade, ending up doubling the pocket money given to him by his grandmother. A few times, teenage Atwood visited his expat aunts who lived in Arizona. He found America dazzling, from the hot desert sun to the wide open space and swimming pools. He considered the U.S. a promised land where anyone could make it. In 1987, after graduating high school and completing A-levels in maths, physics, and economics, Atwood enrolled in the University of Liverpool. At the time, a rave scene was sweeping across the UK. Invited by a classmate for a night out at the Thunderdome Club in Manchester, shy, anxiety-ridden Atwood tried ecstasy and speed for the first time. He loved how the drugs made him feel. With newfound confidence fueled by his high, he was able to talk to anyone. Atwood was quickly sucked into the rave scene, spending each weekend partying. Despite his wild social life, he graduated with first-class honors and a business studies degree. He sought a job in London but was unable to find one. In the summer of 1990, Atwood flew out to Arizona. He didn't have authorization to work in the U.S. However, an aunt worked in the fraud detection business and knew exactly how to help him make a convincing fake H-1B work visa. Atwood got a job as a commission-only stockbroker. He lived cheaply and worked hard, cold calling 500 numbers a day. 5 years later, Atwood was a top earner with a salary of over $500,000 a year and his own secretary and cold callers. But the long hours and stressful job took a toll on Atwood. He had BOBS, burnt-out broker syndrome. Atwood began blowing off steam by throwing parties on the weekends. Wanting to be known as a big spender, he started buying 50 ecstasy pills at a time from a local dealer and giving them away to friends. In the mid-90s, ecstasy in the US was expensive. It could run $30 a hit. Atwood became committed to importing the UK rave scene to Arizona. Eventually, the hectic double life became too much for Atwood. In 1997, he quit his stockbroking day job and invested his substantial savings into technology shares. As the dot-com bubble grew, Atwood's portfolio became worth around $2 million. By this time, Atwood was throwing raves in the desert, in apartments, and in a warehouse in West Phoenix, wherever he could set up. However, he had trouble with getting a steady quality supply of drugs. Frustrated with his small-time local dealer, Atwood went to Los Angeles to purchase from someone higher up on the chain. He came back with 1,000 pills. Atwood became a full-time ecstasy dealer, buying tablets for around $10 each and selling them for between $25 and $30 a pop. One night, Atwood gained protection from the New Mexican Mafia by accident. Atwood was hosting a house party. The crowd was mostly college-age partiers. However, one guy stood out. A tough Mexican with huge tatted-up arms. He was there to deal cocaine, crystal meth, and weed. Since Atwood only sold ecstasy, he didn't see the other dealer as competition. The pair started chatting and the dealer introduced himself as G-Dog. Suddenly, a policeman arrived. After smelling weed, the policeman pulled out a gun and aimed it at the partiers, shouting for no one to leave. G-Dog pulled out his gun, pointed at the cop, and said, "The only one who isn't going to leave is you, The crowd scattered. Atwood and his friends hid in another apartment. The police began going door to door in the complex as helicopters shone down spotlights. There was a sudden pounding on the French window at the back of the apartment, and they assumed it was the cops, but it was G-Dog asking for shelter. Atwood agreed, and the group spent the rest of the night silently hiding in the apartment in the dark. Sometime later, the police knocked at the door, but they eventually left after there was no response. The next morning, Atwood drove G-Dog home, and thanks for hiding him, G-Dog pledged that he and his brothers would have Atwood's back. At first, Atwood had no idea what this meant. A few months later, G-Dog invited Atwood to come meet his brothers. Atwood found himself at a New Mexican Mafia hangout, full of guys in sagging pants, chains, and tattoos. A TV showed CCTV footage of the surrounding area. Next to it was the biggest TV Atwood had ever seen. On top of the huge TV, the gang displayed their rocket-propelled grenade launcher. Atwood was terrified, but relaxed when the group joked with him and offered him protection. The rave scene in Arizona was growing. Atwood expanded his drug dealing business. He sold mainly ecstasy, but also Special K and LSD. He began ordering several thousand ecstasy tablets at a time from his LA connection. He hired a team of people to work for him and paid them in cash, cars, and apartments. Eventually, Atwood wanted to bypass his dealer in LA and purchase straight from the source. He found out that the ecstasy was being made some 5,000 miles away in Amsterdam, Holland. With his fraudulent visa, Atwood realized he couldn't leave the US, so he sent some of his employees to Europe on fact-finding missions. Happy with the samples they brought back, Atwood began testing different methods of smuggling the drugs. At first, Atwood's mules only carried around 5,000 pills at a time, but as they became more confident, they smuggled up to 40,000 pills per mission. Mainly, his employees would go to Germany or France and then take the train to Amsterdam. They would fly back to North America via Mexico and then smuggle the drugs over the US border. The drugs were hidden in luggage, computer towers, or vitamin bottles. Atwood imported ecstasy at $3 a pill from Holland and sold it for $10 a pill to his team of sellers. By 1999, Atwood had amassed a drug-dealing empire. Hundreds of people worked for him. He was the biggest ecstasy dealer in Arizona. Atwood became nicknamed the Bank of England because he had so much money. He was also dubbed the Wolf of Widnes, a play on the Wolf of Wall Street. Atwood's main enforcers were his childhood pal Wildman and his New Mexican Mafia buddy G-Dog. To support his operation, Atwood came up with an elaborate money laundering system, flying old friends over from Widnes to the US to set up bank accounts, which he then used for illegal activities. At the height of his operation, Atwood had his own rave clothing line, a music store, and a personal LSD chemist. He lived among the very rich in an opulent mountainside mansion with his third wife, a topless dancer and internet porn star. He traveled by limo and acquired several luxury apartments, one of which was just to store his ill-gotten gains. Atwood was taking drugs as well as selling them. He took upwards of 10 ecstasy pills every weekend, as well as GHB, crystal meth, Valium, Xanax, and ketamine. Atwood's chaotic life was peppered with extreme moments of paranoia. It wasn't just the drugs. Salvatore Gravano, aka Sammy the Bull, a former henchman for the Gambino crime family who had once testified against John Gotti, set up a rival ecstasy distribution ring. Sammy took a hit out on Atwood and once plotted to kidnap him from a nightclub, but Atwood managed to foil his plans. In late 2000, the dot-com bubble burst and Atwood's stocks lost most of their value. Meanwhile, Atwood struggled to maintain order among his crew, quite often playing referee to their squabbles. Most of his squad was doing so much crystal meth they were growing reckless, paranoid, and plotting against each other. A few of his employees were caught smuggling drugs at airports around the world. Eventually, Atwood fell in love. His new girlfriend Claudia, who wasn't into the rave scene, convinced him to stop his wild ways. Tired of the havoc, Atwood began to wind down his partying and slow his drug use. Furthermore, Atwood stopped dealing and tried to rid himself of his connections to his ecstasy empire. He moved in with Claudia and began to improve his life, but it was too late. For the last 5 years, Atwood had been under federal investigation, complete with undercover cops following him and thousands of wiretaps. The DEA, U.S. Customs, and 3 Arizona police forces created a joint task force to bring Atwood down. Furthermore, the police were able to get 10 witnesses to come forward to testify against Atwood. On a quiet spring day in 2002, the police finally arrested Atwood. Naively, Atwood thought he had to be caught red-handed with drugs in order to get arrested. Per Arizonian laws, the police had 7 years to convict for any drug offense committed, and they do not require physical evidence of the drugs themselves. All of Atwood's assets were seized by the state of Arizona. Atwood was remanded to the notoriously tough Maricopa County Jail, run by controversial Sheriff Joe Arpaio. For the next 26 months, he lived in a tiny maximum security cell with 2 steel bunks and a seatless toilet. Atwood struggled to survive the brutal conditions at the jail, including extreme heat, cockroaches, rotten food, violent inmates, and murderous guards. Drug smuggling was common, with many prisoners addicted to crystal meth or heroin. Stabbings, assault, and rape were frequent. Gangs had more control over the jail than the guards did. To deal with stress, Atwood began keeping a journal. On bits of paper, he wrote entries using a golf pencil sharpened on his cell door. His aunt visited him frequently, and she would smuggle out his writings. She would then type them up and email them to Atwood's parents. Atwood's father, Derek, created a blog called John's Jail Journal and would post entries there. He kept the blog anonymous since Atwood feared reprisal from the guards. Eventually, the popular blog began to draw media interest worldwide as the dangerous conditions at Maricopa County Jail were exposed. After serving over 2 years prior to sentencing, Atwood signed a plea bargain admitting guilt for drug dealing and money laundering. He was sentenced to 9.5 years, thereby avoiding a maximum 200-year jail sentence if his case had gone to trial. In July of 2004, Atwood was moved to the Arizona Department of Corrections to serve out his time. His living conditions improved, although the prisoners were just as violent and dangerous as the ones he left behind. Atwood continued to write John's jail journal blog entries for now, more about the unique, colorful prisoners he met rather than his living conditions. In prison, Atwood attended therapy and read voraciously, starting with classic literature. He studied psychology and philosophy to help him better understand himself and his life choices. Atwood claims he read around 1,000 books in just over 6 years. Atwood was released in December of 2007 after having served about 6 years of his sentence. He was deported to the UK and banned from the US for life. Temporarily, Atwood moved back in with his parents and initially struggled to adjust to life post-prison. Cocaine was trendy in the UK, and various connections kept calling Atwood asking for his help in establishing a cocaine import business to the UK. Atwood continued to write and in 2008 won a short story competition with an entry about prison life. As a result of his win, Atwood was assigned an author to mentor him. Several months later, Atwood received a publishing deal for his first book, which was about his experience in America's toughest jail. Since then, Shaun Attwood has published several books about drugs and the prison system, including 2 more books regarding his wild life of drug dealing and subsequent punishment. He continues to update John's jail blog, publishing letters he's received from prisoners. He also campaigns for humane jail conditions. In addition to being an author, Attwood is a speaker who's given TED Talks and also has spoken to school children across the UK and Europe about drugs and the consequences of his lifestyle. He hopes to prevent youths from making the same mistakes he did. Attwood feels the speeches he makes and the guidance he offers atones for his former life more than the incarceration sentence he served. What are some ways you think recidivism can be lessened? Let us know in the comments. Also, be sure to check out our other video called The White American Who Climbed the Ranks of the Chinese Mafia, The White Devil. Thanks for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.